Hello, and welcome to mentorDINO. I'm your host, Caitlin Rossier. I am an architect and founder of mentorDINO. I firmly believe that architecture, engineering, and construction professionals can achieve true success by embracing human skills as their guiding principle. So each week, I interview amazing professionals in and around the AEC industry as a way to share stories, inspiration, and advice for others finding their own unique career path. Thank you to all of our current subscribers, and if you're new, we'd love to have you join our community. So if you like this episode, please do me a favor and hit subscribe, like, or leave a comment below. It really helps others be able to discover this resource and support them on their own career journey. So let's dive in. I really hope you enjoy this conversation. Welcome to the mentorDINO podcast. I would like to welcome Graciela Carrillo, architect and senior manager at Nassau Boces in Long Island, New York. Thank you, Graciela, for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thank you so much, Caitlin, for inviting me. This is truly an honor for me to be in your podcast.
And I always like starting with my loaded question of the day to get us going. And do you mind introducing yourself and letting my listeners know a little bit about your experience and journey so far in your career and education?
Yes, sure. It's a long story, but I'm going to be very briefly. So I went to architectural school in Bogota, Colombia. I was working there as an architect. Ended up working for the government for a while. It was really a great experience being on the public sector. And while I was there, some unforeseen conditions happened. Due to safety issues, I had to leave the country. So I ended up here with a work visa. Thank God I was able to get a job offer and do all the paperwork for a work visa. And I came to the States in 2003 as a full Colombian architect to pretty much start from scratch in this country. But it was a great experience because I had the opportunity to be working for a firm. It was a consulting engineering architectural firm here in Long Island, New York. And I was able to work in different areas from architecture and also engineering. So throughout those years that I was going through my work visa, it was because I was always concerned that they were going to lay me off because, recession in 2008, I believe we have one. So I was like, I need to keep this job. Otherwise, I'm going to have to go back to Colombia. So I got to do whatever they tell me to do to keep this job. But what that did is that it made me be a really resilient person to just adapt to whatever was coming my way. So I learned how to adapt, how to learn quick, how to perform things in the best way possible. And that actually put me in a really good position because they kept me for 17 years, actually. And I was able to learn from different perspectives, different side of the business. I was doing design work. I was doing construction management. So then it was like a really good experience for me in a professional level. I did all my licensure when I was working for that firm. Finally, I got my license. I got my green card, then my citizenship. So everything started like to aligning in a good way. And at the same time, once I got my license, I think, or just before I got my license, I started getting involved with AIA. And I think that was what changed really the path of not only my career, but also my leadership path. Because as I got involved with the Long Island chapter, just as an associate, I didn't even have a license. I started just learning about all the possibilities when you join an organization, a professional organization. And when you have the desire and the willing to do things, then beautiful things happen. And so I did a lot of stuff at AIA Long Island chapter. I became then in 2020 the president first Latina and third woman in like 76 years. So that was like a really good feeling. You're breaking the ceiling, like people say. So that happened in 2020, middle of COVID. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah, we'll definitely dive into that later.
And at the same time, around that time, I got an offer with the agency that I'm working now with, Nassau Boces, to go work as project manager of capital projects. It's a public agency. Is funded by New York State taxes, school district taxes. So I went back to the public sector. So I started in the public sector in Colombia, came to the States and did consulting for 17 years, 18 years, and then moved back to the public sector. And that, I think, was great because it's like going back to my roots. And I absolutely love what I'm doing now. And while all this is happening, then the Immigrant Architects Coalition was created, which we also will talk about that later. And I also got involved with another nonprofit organization, Arquitina, which is an organization founded by Alicia Ponce. And that one is mentoring Latinas who are pursuing licensure in the States. So that's, in like 5 minutes, the summary of the last 20 years of my life.
Yeah, that's a very good nutshell summary. And you've been all over the place and doing so much. So I'm excited to dive into all these little components. But shifting, how did you decide to go to Long Island from Colombia and trying, like, when you knew you had to leave Colombia, how did you figure out where to even start to look? Because the States are huge. And so it's, where do you even start to pick a spot if somebody's trying to, move over to the US, what cities to look for? Is anything easier to shift into?
Yeah, so that's really a good question because my experience, actually, I was very lucky. My brother was already living in the States. He's a civil engineer, so he was working for this consulting company that I started working with. So he really got me into different interviews with different firms that he knew. And then I accepted one offer from one of those firms. So I had that privilege of having someone already here in the business, even though he was not an architect. He worked for an architectural engineering firm. So I was able to get into the profession much easier than, I would say, 80% of the people that try to come here. So for me, it was like a no-brainer. Even though my family, he lived in Florida and my mom moved with him in Florida, I was able to choose Long Island because the office had their headquarters here. And I didn't want to go to Florida because I really wanted to change. And Florida, especially Miami, is like Latin America. Most of the people there are Latin. And I was like, no, I really want to go somewhere else just to experience the culture better. And that's why I chose New York. But I would say if people are trying to look for cities to come, try to really find someone that is already here that can guide you, and maybe someone that that is also in the business of architecture. And if you don't know anybody, try to do that networking before you move here. I get that a lot. I get a lot of people that contact me. Oh, I live in, I don't know, Venezuela or Costa Rica, Europe, whatever. And I'm planning to move there. Can you please guide me? How are the salaries? So, find someone, even if you don't know that person, reach out through LinkedIn. It's a powerful resource that you can really approach anybody. And if you're lucky and that person has 2 minutes to answer, your questions, you can start getting guided on where should I apply? What should I look for? So that would be just my advice for anybody that wants to come and has no friends, no family, nobody to guide them to navigate how to get a job.
Yeah. And so when you were I'm slowly learning work visas and all the intricacies of them since joining a larger firm. And so I know there's timetables with it. So when you were working at the firm for 17 years, what were you striving for to get past the work visa stage to be able to have like the green card and then moving towards citizenship?
So that was pretty challenging, pretty much, because when you're going through that process, you need to show the government that you are exceptional at what you're doing and that you have to get hired by that firm because they cannot fulfill your position with an American. So that process was very stressful because the company had to put advertisement on the newspaper, advertising your job. And I remember me checking with the receptionist because those advertisements at that time had to be on for like a month or something. Things have changed. So it's probably not the same now, but at that time it was like that. So every time I'm checking, did you get any resume? Did you get any resume? And then whatever resumes they get, they had to be sent, well, first to HR, review them, really see what the qualifications were, and then to the attorneys, because they were finally the ones that will say, oh, she can't compete with these people, they got the same profile and this person doesn't need a work permit and she's going to need one, so we can't go that route. So I actually enrolled into my master's before I applied to my green card. I enrolled into a master's, well, not only because I wanted to do it, of course, but because I wanted to be ready for when that time came that I needed to prove that I really was like exceptional in what I was doing. So it took me a while, but it went through, thank God.
Yeah. And it's a different way to look at it too, because, I'm trying to do good at my job, but I'm not trying to, always strive to be exceptional all the time. Like, you strive to do good work, but I feel like if I was striving for that other level, I'd have added pressure on me to just, added stress and, trying to prove yourself more.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
And I know you were on the public side in Colombia and now back on the public side here. What are the differences with working on the public side for two different countries?
There is actually not that much difference. I realized that. So when you work in the public side, everything is slower. Like, time goes and things take time and you need 3,000 approvals and you have to go through the process. Not that when you're in consulting, you don't go through the process, but things are more expedite because you're a consultant. You need to meet a deadline. You need to expedite. You need to just go. So when I came from Colombia, working from the government, I was like with that mentality, not the mentality, but just used to be working at that pace. So when I started here, I noticed right away how things were so differently. I had to learn a lot about building codes and standards here that we're not using in Colombia. So that learning time plus the fact that everything is super fast, it was super stressful. I remember coming home every day with a headache and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so tired. And plus learning English because my English wasn't really as good as is right now. Right now, I have super heavy accent. I still have a lot of grammar mistakes, but I really don't care about that. But at that time, it was not even 20% of what it is right now. So it was a full struggle. But now that I came back to the public sector, I was ready for what I was going to confront. It's like, I know probably is similar to Colombia. And yes, it was very similar. I had to learn a lot of procedures, a lot of steps, get used to, if I want to do this, I cannot do it now. I have to go through this, and probably in a year and a half, we will have that project going in design phase. So it's all those expectations that take longer, plus the funding and managing all the the budget. It's another world, but it's very exciting too, because then you have the capability of working with amazing teams of consultants, construction management contractors, plus our stakeholders, which are the school districts and the schools itself, principals, teachers, custodians. So it's really interesting just to work with the entire team and be able to manage every single phase of the project and respond to every single person.
So you're staying on all the way from conception of we need to do this work all the way through construction and complete.
Yes. So we manage capital projects for schools, renovations, additions, new projects, also operational projects. So if we're doing something in-house, that we use our own crews to, let's say, change the flooring somewhere or put some partitions here and there, from the beginning of the project, putting together the team, going out for bid, going into construction, and then finalizing everything. So
yeah,
that's why I like it so much.
And how many projects are you juggling at one time?
Oh, a lot. I have, I think, 8 capital projects plus 8 or 7 operational bids, and it's a lot going on. But it's good because the day goes fast, and you're not alone. You're working with a full team. Even though I'm the manager of those projects, we all help each other. We're 5 project managers within my department, engineers and architects. So we help each other. We all have a ton of work, but it's good working.
Yeah, and at a different pace, so you can handle that workload.
Yeah.
Like if you had to handle that workload at the pace of the private sector, like I would not be able to keep my head on straight, just what's going on where. So that's also important.
Definitely. And that on top of AIA, it really adds a lot. I'm fortunate that where I am, my boss actually is an AIA member. He's an AIA member of my chapter, so he supports me on everything. When I finished my role with AIA Long Island as the past president, I was elected by New York State to be on the Strategic Council. So I've been on the Strategic Council. This is my 3rd year. And this year, the council elected me to be the moderator of the group. So I've been working as the moderator this year. And last week, they elected me to be director at large at the board. So the national board has always one director that is elected by the Strategic Council. So next year, 2025, 26, and 27, I'll be a director at large at the board, elected by the council.
Congratulations. That's
Thank you.
Fun. So what, I guess shifting over to the AIA side, so what does the Strategic Council do within the AIA?
So the Strategic Council is a group of architects. Each state has a representative for the Strategic Council. And we are a group of professionals advising the board on what the future of the profession would be. So we go through different areas of study throughout the year, and we present to the board at the end of the year a report that says, okay, for instance, AI, this is what we foresee that the next 5 to 10 years is it's going to bring AI for architecture. So we recommend, this different, initiatives or issues to consider for the future of the organization.
Yeah.
So we have 5 areas of study. One is artificial intelligence. Another one is the value of architecture. Another one is equity, well-being, and climate. And climate this year is working on water, because it's always carbon. It's always related to carbon footprint, decarbonization. And this year, the group is studying water because water is a big issue for climate change. And we haven't studied that in the past. So they are studying that topic this year, and it's great.
So do they shift those topics per year, or do they stay on for a couple years?
It depends. Yes, it depends on the moderator and vice moderator. Sort of like guide the council on what study groups should happen the following year. But sometimes it's like a consensus. For instance, when I started as moderator, we chose like the broad topics, equity, climate, and then each study group selected, okay, if we're going to do equity, we're going to do this specific from equity. So they have, of course, the leisure of saying and proposing what they want to study for that year.
Yeah, and kind of honing it in so it's not just the big topic of equity, because you can't tackle that in a year, but what's like a tiny subset that, you can start moving things forward with. So
exactly.
And then what will the role shifting over to the board be coming up? Are you shifting out of strategic council and onto the board? Or are you keeping an arm in both?
No, so the strategic council is 3 years. This is my third year, so it will be my final. The moderator role within the strategic council is 1 year, so I will be done with the moderator this year. And then in January, I'll roll onto the board full time.
Got it. What are the time commitments of those? Are they like regular weekly meetings, evenings, monthly?
So for the strategic council, the study groups itself is once a month. They have like an hour and a half meeting internally just to go over all the research work. The council itself, we get together 4 times a year, 2 times in person and 2 times virtual, or it could be maybe 2 or 3 times virtual. And we also started doing, we call them connection meetings. So it's like informal meetings once a month just to talk about whatever we want to talk about, but the study groups. So it's sort of like a connection time so we can create community within the council and not just work on research and data and studies. So we started that this year. And so we have the months that we're not getting together as a group, like going through studies, we just do that meeting just to chat about life.
Yeah. No, that's great having those meetups, because I feel like a lot of bigger councils or groups or initiatives, even within offices, it's always just, what are you meeting about, and trying to check off things. And I think spending that time to get to know your peers, because the whole point of AIA is the network and growing the community and growing the profession. And so I always feel like you need that relaxed time where it's not so structured to learn a little bit about each other. So I think that's fantastic. Shifting over to AIA Long Island president time year. So that was backtracking a little bit. So that was 2020 and 2021 for that?
Yes.
So
2 years.
How was that experience, one, moving into a president position, but also right in the heart of COVID?
So I was all excited and I had all the plans in the world and I had this agenda, in these meetings. And we did the installation of the board in January, like at the end of January. We went to grassroots. It was New Orleans, I remember, in March. So I was there as the president representing. And when we are in New Orleans is when actually they started talking about COVID, and we're like, oh my God, we're here. I wonder if we're going to get sick. But you don't know what it was. Like you heard about it. And then when we came back, it was total closure of everything. So I was like, so what are we going to do? So we started right away doing online meetings. I signed up with Zoom. I figured out how it worked. We did the first webinar in April, and we talked about, working remote. I was the facilitator of the panel discussion. That's when I learned that when you're in a webinar, you couldn't have people on camera or mics on. And I was very disappointed. I'm like, we wanted people to talk and we can't because I set it up, the webinar, as a webinar.
Yeah.
But I didn't know those things at that time. And I didn't read the instructions. This was like, do it quick. We need to set this up. Just do it. So anyway, I learned a lot about how to facilitate things online. And we just were very creative to make sure that we kept everybody engaged. So all the chapters, and this is not just Long Island, we started doing happy hours, different sessions that talk about different things, just to keep people on the screen and talking to each other, not to lose that connection. So that was great because I pretty much was on my computer every day and every week. Like, we had an event and every day we had a meeting. So it was actually very intensive. It's not like if you were a president during COVID time, you really didn't do anything. I think we did even more, because now online you have to be available 24 hours, pretty much 7 days. So I was super busy during those 2 years. And then when everything opened, going back to hosting in-person events, we did our first design awards ceremony online, and we hired actually a production company. I had to go to one of these green rooms and record my speech. And my speech was 3 minutes long, and it took me an hour recording because they always like, no, you're saying this wrong. No, this is, oh my God, it was so frustrating.
Yeah.
I was like, I can't believe
Rather
this is
than
happening.
doing it live, and if there's little mess ups, nobody's gonna notice.
Oh
anyway.
yeah, no, everything had to be super, super perfect. So it was a great production. Actually, I'm very proud of the work that we did with the chapter, and it was all a learning experience, but it was a great experience. And that's when I also started a website that it was called Powerful Speeches Women in Architecture, because I realized everybody's doing all these meetings online. I am the co-founder and co-chair of the Women in Architecture Committee in Long Island. And I was like, all these Women in Architecture Committee are doing so many amazing events that I get anxiety when I don't know what's going on and I cannot register. So I created this website where I was compiling all the events happening around the state. So they would send me the different chapters. Oh, we're going to have this event, this day, whatever. So I would put that in the calendar, and people at that time were using that just to sign up for different events. Of course, it's not working anymore because everybody's doing now things in person more than online. So I'm not updating that anymore. But that website also, I created all the podcasts by women, which I'm not sure if I put yours already. I think I did. If I didn't, I'm going to put it, because I started compiling a bunch of podcasts about women in architecture, and also different websites that support women in architecture. So that website is all about women in architecture. We did a survey for salaries of women specifically in architecture, because when you go to any survey website, you don't get the real picture. You get just average salary. And we know that women get paid 12 cents less than a man. So we wanted to do this survey just to see what was the salary reality for women in architecture. So it's organized by state and also by positions and experience. So that was also compiling that website. But now that I'm talking about that website, I need to update that website.
Yeah, and it's so much of a conversation. I actually, before I created mentorDINO, I did a Pittsburgh equity in architecture survey trying to dive into Pittsburgh, because when you look at like the AIA calculator, they group cities. So Pittsburgh tends to get grouped with Philadelphia, which is very different than us, and we get grouped with New York, and very different on the cost of living.
Yeah.
And so I did that, I think, in 2019. And I had a lot of professionals use that as leverage to ask for a raise once they got to see behind the curtain of just our local community. And then I did it again in 2023 as I transitioned to mentorDINO. And it was kind of a great like pre and post COVID numbers and seeing how things have changed, but there's still the pay discrepancies, and just trying to help people out locally is really important. People just want to have information to know what's going on, and that can help them. But when it's bigger, vague areas, then they don't have the clout to like step forward and speak up because they don't have that proof. I even had firms reach out to me like, hey, what goes into the number for this? Because they were using it to also set up for positions and what people are looking for. And I was like, oh, I'm honored. Like I was just thinking I was going to be helping out an individual or two that, need some help, and ended up helping firms in the region too. So
that's great. That's really, really great.
Yeah, but definitely little things like that is fantastic. So definitely get the website updated.
Yeah, I have to.
And so what are you doing on the Women in Architecture committee side?
So on the Women in Architecture, I'm still co-chairing that event. Actually, last night we were part of the golf outing of the chapter. We gave 4 scholarship for women in architecture, like students, architectural students. We do that every year. We started 3 years ago with that scholarship. So throughout the year, we host about 3 to 4 events. At the beginning, we were hosting like 7, 8 events, and it was really just crazy. We're like, no, this is too much for us. So we slowed down the last couple of years. We said we're just going to do 3 or 4 a year. But it's good. We started in 2018 with 5 members, and we are 16 now, like active committee members. So I'm very proud of that group. It's a really good support network. We help each other a lot, and I would never change that for anything, because we call it our sisterhood. It's our local sisterhood. We can talk about whatever we want and always come up with a solution if anybody's struggling with anything.
Yeah. And I know the AIA within the bigger New York City has different, I guess, I don't even know if I want to call it sub-members. Like AIA Long Island is one area. Like, does the Bronx have something different because New York is so large? But then did those groups talk to each other?
So New York City, which is the 5 boroughs, they each have a chapter, an AIA chapter. Long Island is outside the 5 boroughs. So New York State has 13 chapters all told. So it's upstate New York, Long Island area, the 5 boroughs, Westchester, and upstate. I already said that. So the 5 chapters, they talked a lot in between of them. And also Long Island. We do host things together with Brooklyn, with Queens, with New York. Sometimes, especially like the emerging professionals, they get together. They host things together. So it's in New York State, they have their their regular meetings where they invite all the presidents all the time from all the chapters. So they all communicate each other frequently.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure how that worked, because I know in Pennsylvania we don't have as many, and like Pittsburgh's over in one area, but we don't cross as much. Like when COVID happened, they did what's called Palm. So you kind of have subgroups, and it's a student, a young professional, recently licensed, senior, and a principal. And during COVID, they blended Philly and Pittsburgh, which was kind of nice. So then you could kind of learn people across the state, but then you miss that, hey, we're all going to a bar after work, and that local side. So yeah.
Yeah.
But that's also a lot larger of a state and crossing everything. But I wanted to shift over to the Immigrant Architects Coalition that you mentioned earlier.
Yay!
So what's the story behind how that started and what you guys are working towards with that?
It's a beautiful story. It started in 2019. Young Law contacted me. He's like, Graciela, and we knew each other because of the Young Architects Forum. I was the yard, the representative for New York in 2017 and 18, and he was at large strategic council. I'm sorry, at large Young Architect Forum representative. Uh, so he contacted me in 2019, so like 2 years after we met at the forum, and he's like, Graciela, I want to put together a session about immigrants for the Vegas conference. How about if we do something? I'm like, let's do it. So we found a third person, Shahaz Sadek. She was based in Dallas at that time. And we were like, let's talk about immigrant architects. So we put together the session, each of us from a very different perspective. Yunlok, he's owner of his own firm. He's in California. I was at that time working in consulting in New York, and I was licensed. And she was an associate at that time and working at Smith Group at that time. So we were talking about licensure, cultural bias, opening your own firm, immigration, a bunch of different topics in 90 minutes. And that session was on a Saturday at like 9 in the morning, where you know that people don't go to those sessions because after the party, everybody's hangover or it's super early. They don't want to go. The room was absolutely packed. We did a poll, and 80%, 90% of the room were immigrants. And when we finished the session, you know how everybody leaves? Mm-hmm. You know, no, they stay. They kick us out. They're like, you got to go. We have another session. And they stayed. They were making a line. We have pictures of people lining up to talk to us. So when we left that, we realized there was really that need of that support group. We said AIA has a lot of support groups, committees, but we don't have an immigrant community per se. Mm-hmm. There is a lot of immigrants, but we're just spread out everywhere. So we said, let's start the Immigrant Architects Coalition just to start the conversation. And we just started very informal by just giving lectures at different chapters, universities, organizations. And it was just that at the beginning. So as we kept talking about our experiences and giving advice to people, more people will come to us for help. Oh, I need help. I can find a job, or I'm miserable in my job, or I'm having issues with immigration. It was different things that we were contacted for. So in 2021, I believe, we were like, why don't we publish a book with different stories? So when people read them, maybe they can find some relation with the same story, and they can contact that person if they're struggling in something in their life. So we did that. We had a bunch of amazing architects, and we call it designers because some of them don't have a license here. They have a license in their own country, but not here. So we call the book City Shapers: Stories of Immigrant Designers. Mm-hmm. And they are from around the world, and they are also everywhere, like throughout the States. So we started with that book, and we had a really good review from people. They were really excited. We hosted several book signings for that book. And then this year, we decided to create another book, which is the Prospering in the U.S., a Handbook for Immigrant Architects. And that one, what talks about, is like a roadmap since the day you arrive to this country until maybe you're going to open your firm. So it's sort of like advising you on what to do from the beginning. We talk about education, licensure, the importance of getting involved with community and organizations, how to get a job or experiences going to interviews, preparing your resume, portfolio, then also work related topics, cultural bias too, and then getting your own firm, like opening your own firm. So, and we talk about also marketing. It's like super, super broad, but it talks about everything from an architect
Hmm.
perspective, because of course our experiences are completely different as an American experience. So yeah, no, that book was awesome. We did a book signing at the past AIA 24 in Washington, DC, and we sold out. It was a really great experience. We had 18 book co-authors at that book signing. That there are 24 book co-authors in this last book, and from those we had 18 in Washington. So that was a great experience.
Yeah. And there's so many things that, as somebody who's not an immigrant, there's a lot of stuff that I just check a box whenever I'm filling out different forms that I don't even think twice about it. But then when you can understand people in a different lens, you can understand some of the things that aren't so simple anymore. So I guess from starting a company, do you have to have a green card by that point to start a business in the US and start a firm? Like, what's that
It all
barrier?
depends. That's the thing. It all depends
Where?
on where you are doing that. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the beauty of this country.
Because it's like, I'm
Is
thinking of like, okay, what forms did I fill out when I made mentorDINO a business? And I'm like trying to remember, but anything would have just been like simple checkboxes since I'm from the States. So now I want
yeah,
to like
it
go
depends.
back and take a look.
Yeah, no, it depends on where you file documents. We incorporated the Immigrant Architects Coalition here in New York State, so it's on my name.
Hmm.
On that form, I don't remember having to check any box that says that I'm a citizen,
Hmm.
but you have to have your social security
Yeah.
number, and you have to register the incorporation with a tax number too. So it depends of each state, so I cannot
Yeah.
tell you what the general rule is like the same as licensure. Like you think that because you're licensed, like in Colombia, you're licensed in Colombia and it's Colombia, not Bogota.
Yeah.
But here you are licensed in New York,
Hmm.
because it's not the same as Florida or California or any other state. So that's why I say it's the beauty of this country, that each state has its own rules. It's not like a general
Hmm.
rule for the country, which most of the countries work like that. It's a general rule for everything.
Yeah. And so I guess that's important for anybody coming over. It's really do the research on maybe a couple states if there's a
Yes,
few, and just see what your circumstances and what the rules within those states are to figure out if there's an easier path, I guess, or at least
exactly.
less barriers, less paperwork, bureaucracy that you have to
Yes,
get through to, especially if you're licensed in another country already, like, I would feel you'd already proved yourself there, that it's like, okay, I have to start over in some sense, and that can be hard.
yeah. When people contact me and like, oh, what do I need to do to get licensed in the US? I'm like, the first question I do, where? Where are you planning to come?
Hmm.
If you don't tell me a specific state, I cannot tell you if your education is going to be validated or not, depending on your license or not. So we need to know where you're planning to go. And also within the states, we have sort of like identify which are the states that are much easier for immigrants to get licensed.
Hmm.
So we always tell them, go to Georgia.
Yeah.
Georgia, Georgia apparently is very good in like accepting the foreign architect path for NCARB. I'm sure there are other states that are the same situation. I would like to identify those states so I can have more answers to people. But I think that's a homework that we will have to do internally.
Yeah, and even just where they're coming from. I know I had a great conversation from somebody that came over from Russia, and it was just easier for her to go get her master's in the States because trying to get all of the paperwork from two countries that aren't really getting along sometimes. So it's, hey, the path I need to take because where I'm coming from, I need to go down this route to make it simpler in that process.
Yeah.
So,
Mm-hmm.
and I know you also had scholarship opportunities with the IAC. So, how's that been going, adding scholarships to it?
Yeah, so this year we launched our first scholarship for students, for international students specifically. And it was the first time we launched it, and we received an amazing amount of applications. We got almost 50
Mm-hmm.
applications, which is a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, we're just a small group. Like, I didn't even think we would have that outreach,
Yeah.
even though we send it to many universities, but we never thought that we were going to get that big response. So we had one scholarship, unfortunately, just one, because we're poor. We don't have that much money. But as we are growing, all the funds that we collect, like we fundraise, are for scholarships. So next year, we're going to start, besides the students' scholarship, we're going to launch a scholarship for immigrants going through the ARE process, because every single penny
Mm-hmm.
helps. So we're going to do that next year. And we are also planning to launch a mentoring program. And the reason why we want to do a mentoring program, even though AIA has mentoring programs, NOMA has mentoring, Argentina has the mentoring for Latinas, there are no mentoring for
Mm-hmm.
immigrants by immigrants. So when you are mentored by someone that has your own background or similar, it's a different experience when you are mentored by an American. I value both perspective, and every time I talk to someone that is looking forward to find mentors, I always tell them, don't stick to just with one
Mm-hmm.
mentor. Always have a pool of them, because that's what brings value to you. Have different perspectives helping you out. So I always tell people, go to these different organizations, go into those mentoring programs. But if we offer this immigrant to immigrant mentoring, it's going to be a different experience. And I think that's going to help a lot of people that really need that guidance and more understanding of what they're going through.
Yeah. And even just having different types of people and different levels too when you're trying to find a mentor is important. So even if Noma has their own program and Argentina, which we didn't even talk about yet, um, I think it's still important to have that because you are always trying to find community in this world and just people to talk to. So like you could be in both Argentina and a mentoring program with the IAC and it still bring
Yes.
a lot of value because it can give different perspectives, different situations. So and just
Hmm.
connections to people that can become lifelong friends or just people to poke around with different ideas or as life changes. So
Yeah.
and Argentina does a great job with a mentoring program because I always see the cohorts are always full every year, and there's always people on wait lists to be in. So
Yes.
that's what's a little bit going on over there if anybody's looking to get involved in Argentina.
So we are actually, the registration for the next cohort, the fall cohort, is open right now. The due date is coming up in a few weeks from now. The requirement is that you need to have an open NCARB record, and you have to actually be testing. Like, we
Mm-hmm.
actually look at that, because if you're not testing, you're not going to get full advantage of the mentoring cohort. So that's why if we have openings, we may let people that are not testing enter, but like you said, is always at full
Mm-hmm.
capacity. So we try not to do a very large group, because when it's too large, then that, you lose that connection. When we have meetings where everybody shows up, mentors and mentees, it's too many people. So people tend, like those, the
Mm-hmm.
shy person tend not to speak, and we want everyone to participate. So it's doing a great job. We have, I don't know what's the percentage now of the mentees that have joined the program and have get their license, but we have a few, and now they become mentors.
Mm-hmm.
So all those Latinas that got their license while during Argentina time, now they are mentors, and that's absolutely amazing, because it's like that fresh blood. I did my license a long time ago. I still mentor
Mm-hmm.
because I still can do it, but when they have specific questions about specific areas, I'm like, you know what? Let's just check with someone that just tested, because I don't want to misguide
Yeah,
you.
because it's always
It's
evolving. Like I took the last version of the
exactly.
exam and I can give some guidance, but there's some questions that's, yeah, let's go find somebody that just took that version because they did a big change going from 4.0 to 5. So
Mm-hmm.
definitely important.
Yes.
And I always like wrapping up my podcast with this final question. And it's, what advice do you have for young professionals just starting their career?
So my advice is ask a lot of questions and don't pretend that you know it all. A lot of newly grads have that attitude, and that really doesn't help. And they're really smart, because think about everything that they're learning now because of AI and new resources and new software. They definitely are super, super capable of a lot of things that back in the days out of school we couldn't do. But just know how to approach, the
Mm-hmm.
business, and be very smart about it. Just show how good you are in a very humble way, and always ask everything. Don't keep it to yourself, because that's when mistakes happen. And if it happens, just own
Mm-hmm.
it. That was something that I learned from the beginning. I had no issues telling my bosses I screw up. I think I made a horrible mistake. I'm going to have to figure out how to fix this. But just the fact that they saw that I acknowledge it and I'm not trying to blame it on someone else, you gain respect and confidence and trust. And that's really important. And my other advice is work on your soft skills. And I'm sure you have heard this a lot. But a lot of people don't work on
Mm-hmm.
that. So their communication skills are horrible. If you don't have good communication skills, if you don't communicate with people well, meaning you listen to them, you know what they need, you try to help, you're a team player, things don't work. People are not going to like you. And
Yep.
those soft skills are very important. Network. Network is also a skill that people don't know how to do. And if you work on that, you'll see like the world just opens, like the doors are unlimited. So that's the type of advice that I give newly graduates or anybody get involved with organizations. Whatever you see that is of your interest, go and volunteer, because you're thinking it's my free time that I could be doing something else, but you're working on your own professional growth and personal growth. You're building those relationships, and at the end, those relationships, in my experience, they became my
Mm-hmm.
family. I consider AIA and IAC and Argentinas part of my family. Like those are my friends that I totally trust, and I can share whatever I want to share with them.
Yeah, because it's such a big learning curve when you start your career that I think people just try to hone in on the technical aspects or trying to get the design right, and they don't look outside that box, and they kind of get tunnel vision, just trying to get through that and maybe start the AREs to get licensed, but they kind of skip over the big picture, and it takes many years for a lot of professionals to get the big picture and get that practice and understanding of the soft skills and networking and relationships that, you know, can really open your eyes to a whole world of possibilities. So I think that's fantastic advice.
Thank you.
And if anybody wants to get a hold of you, have questions, what's a good way to get a hold of you?
So my LinkedIn is pretty good. So you can find me, Graciela Carrillo. And it's 2 R's and 2 L's.
I'll put the link to your LinkedIn down below, so it makes it really easy. And I'll grab links of Argentina, IAC, anything with AIA Long Island to make it super easy for anybody to find all the different organizations that you're a part of. If anybody wants to help support, volunteer, or donate to different scholarships, so then you guys can offer more.
Yes, that would be great. Anybody can contact me through those resources, and I'm always happy to respond. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer, but I always reply to everyone. So feel free to contact me anyway.
Yeah. But thank you so much, Graciela, for taking the time to speak with me. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Caitlin. I loved joining your podcast. You're doing an amazing work, and I'm sure you're helping a lot of people that listen to you. So kudos to you. It's a good work that you're putting out to the community.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed our discussion today. Learn some advice to take with you and see how our industry is all tied together to create the world around us. Check out the description below for any links or resources we discussed. If you liked the episode, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. Give me a thumbs up and leave a comment below. It really helps others be able to discover this resource and support finding that career path that best works for them. If you know someone that has inspired your own career that you'd like me to interview, let me know in the comments below, or you can reach out to me via my website or LinkedIn. I'd be happy to share their story or your own. Thank you again, and I cannot wait for the next career story I get to share with you next week.